I define grit as the ability to do hard things on purpose. And the only way you grow it is by doing things that exceed your current capability. And as a 20-year-old dad, everything about my kids exceeded my current capability. Right? So I just ran away. I just tried to avoid it, or I tried to, in a sense, protect myself from the danger of the uncertainty, the chaos. And thank goodness I had an amazing wife who was able to carry that, but it was really hard on her. I was physically there, but and I was happy to run all the errands, to do all the logistical stuff as a dad, because that came easy to me. So I did the things that came easy to me. I avoided the things that were hard for me. That's what I had to learn, is how to run towards the things that are hard for you.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Dad podcast. Today, I'm really excited and looking forward to a conversation with Clay Speakman. He's a former guy that was in tech, exited that, and now loves to run around and put people's face in the dirt. So I look forward to him talking about that and kind of seeing what that looks like. But if you can, Clay, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your family, and then a little bit about your business as well.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Adam. Clay Speakman, been married 26 years to an amazing woman who's only made me better. Got 4 kids, 3 by birth, 1 by foster, ages 25 down to 19. So my wife and I are navigating the newly found empty house syndrome, which is a scary and wonderful place to be, to navigate. Being a father has been the most crazy, up and down, challenging, rewarding, frustrating thing in my life. I don't think any father would argue otherwise. And if you do, then you just weren't in the game enough, because being in the game is like constant chaos and heartbreak and betrayal and love and affection. And it's just overwhelming. But I love being a father, obviously. I've built businesses most of my career because my goal in life was to not have a normal job. That's pretty much the only thing I knew as a 20-year-old kid. And so I've been able to build businesses. I've had people support my dreams, and that's been amazing. Built an entertainment company, built a tech company, and recently had a situation where I had to decide what I want to do next. And I decided to pursue my passion of helping people find grit, helping people overcome the comfort crisis that is all too easy to fall into. And I'm really having a good time helping business leaders find their grit superpower and to change their worlds.
That is awesome. I would love to turn this into a completely selfish session and have you take over my comfort crisis that I'm currently in. So, but we'll see how the conversation goes if you're going to put my face in the dirt too. But no, I love what you said. Basically, I mean, I didn't get the exact quote, but basically, if you haven't experienced those ups and downs, you're not in it enough. Like, you're not involved enough in the kids' lives and stuff. And I think that's a huge thing to kind of. I'm chewing on it even more as I'm saying it out loud, because it can go so many different directions when you look at it from that perspective of like. If you change the angle of what you're looking at, like, I get to experience those ups and downs. It is a blessing to be experiencing those ups and downs because I'm actually involved and being there next to my kids and experiencing this with them. And it's not I have to, it's an I get to. And if you're not being involved in there, then you're literally avoiding one of the most wonderful blessings in life. Of I think it's Ben Shapiro talks about. He's like, when you're just by yourself, your ups and downs kind of do this, and then you get married and they kind of do this. Your highest highs have something to do with your wife, and your lowest lows kind of have something to do with your wife. And then when you have kids, that goes up even higher, and your highest highs have something to do with your kids, and your lowest lows have something to do with your kids. Those ups and downs, and I think that can only happen if you're actually engaging and trying to be involved. And obviously, you can have some really far downs if you're not engaged, and you'll find that out later on in your teenage years. But anyways, I went off on a diatribe for almost no reason there. Let's go back to. I want to rewind before I ask you too many questions about your family and your business. I want to rewind and kind of chat about Clay growing up. What was it like for you growing up? Tell us about like your parents and how it was for you growing up.
Grew up in, a typical good household, parents that were together, had discretionary income, lived in a good neighborhood, went to good schools. But I grew up in a situation where my parents lost a child before I was born. And, I don't have a lot of childhood memories, but I do know my parents were, understandably so, probably trying to shelter, the risk in my life a good bit because having lost a kid already. But as a result, as a kid, I just wanted to go do crazy things. I just wanted to be on my own and go do my things. And so, when I grew up out of that, I always wanted to do crazy things. I always wanted to push the limits, push the boundaries, be reckless, things like that. And I had to balance that with, being responsible, being safe, which was just not very high on my chart. But then I grew up idolizing, the military and, the fastest, jets and the biggest warships and things like that. But I had this feeling inside that I could never do that. I was not strong enough. I didn't have what it takes. I was scared of being a strong man. And so, I dealt with that a lot, and I wasn't able to be a strong dad, right? Because I just had that limiting belief that I wasn't really strong inside. I was weak. And I had to figure that out. And I spent about 10 years from when I was 30 to 40, sort of testing myself, challenging myself, going to pretty far extremes, trying to see if I really had strength inside. And that's really where I got my internal grit. And I did things like the death race, and I did things like 100 Spartan races and 12 ultra marathons and a snowshoe marathon and multi-day survival events, and saw people almost die, saw people actually die and be revived next to me, because that's the limit I had to push to figure out if I was strong enough. I had to go to those extremes. But that's really what defines me today. And it really changed my relationship as a father with my kids in a lot of ways. And I'd love to get into that when the appropriate time. But I did see a change in that arc with my kids because, like you said, the difference between having to do something and getting to do something is all about the approach and the mindset. People would ask, why would you do that stuff? Why would you willingly sign up? And it's because I get to do that stuff. I don't have to. The same thing with kids. You get to be their father. Nobody else gets to be their father. Nobody else gets to be heartbroken, betrayed. Nobody else gets that kind of position in their lives. You get to get that. And it's going to suck. It's going to be hard. But instead of running away from it, embrace it. The more you put into it, the harder it's going to hurt. But nothing good comes out of sitting on the sidelines.
Boy, it's not the truth for sure. Man, that's awesome. I love the no one else gets to do that, especially as a father. Like the first image that popped in my head was the celebration my son and I got this past weekend when he won a medal in his golf tournament. It was like man, oh man, what a joy of being a father is to be able to watch this and have that feeling. And there's no other dad that feels that way about my son right now. I'm the one who gets to feel this. This is awesome. But so, as you're saying that, it sounds to me that you're blaming your mom and dad for the desires for you to go climb crazy mountains and do certain things. So that's you get to blame them for doing all of that. So when you mentioned that it was I think you kind of implied that you didn't feel necessarily like you were kind of sheltered from danger growing up. Is that did I hear that right?
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing but positive feelings from my childhood growing up. It's only when going back and reflecting on the situation in hindsight does it offer any sort of roadmap to how we end up as adults. I think that everybody can go in psychotherapy about what went on when they were 2, 3, 5, 7 years old that they don't even remember that shapes them. But for me, I think my parents obviously did the best that they knew how to do in the situation they were in, because that's all you can do as parents. But it definitely shapes who we are. And then as adults, we have to deal with all that, deal with it productively or deal with it destructively. You know, we have a choice, and we're not victims. We have to choose to be the heroes in our own story. We can't just be the victims in somebody else's. But the default for most people that I meet is they just want to blame everybody else and blame everything else for where they're at.
For sure.
Because that's the victim, right? And as a parent, you can't be a victim. You got to be the hero. You got to own your own decisions, own your situation, and jump in and get in the dirty stuff with your kids. And you got to do that in business. And that's just what I try to do, is focus on how to be in control of the things I can control. And the rest of it is just there to shape, you know, the challenges that I've got to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a thing here on my board. It says the three monsters: resistance, distraction, and victimhood. Don't feed the monsters, right? The victimhood seems to be something like we all have, like there's like a card that people carry with them, their victim card, and all the things that they're victimized by in life, and all these things. And yes, like all of us are going to be a victim of some sort of something at some point in life, and that doesn't have to be a victimhood card. That can be a resistance card. Like, you're building your resistance, you're building your ability to become anti-fragile instead of being completely fragile. You know, and it's it baffles my mind at what we're seeing in society, what we're seeing in life, and I think something that you're doing is pushing people to that point of like becoming anti-fragile and realizing that, like, you don't have to hold on to that victim card. Like, victimhood does not feed anything. Like, it feeds literally nothing.
I have the pleasure of leading a Spartan program or Spartan team for GoBundance, which is a mastermind that we're in, right? And I take guys that, you know, have built great businesses, and we go do Spartan events as a show of, you know, tests and challenge and things like that. And last year we were in Florida, and we ran a race, and guys were kind of complaining this and this, whatever. And then we went back out and we attached with the Wounded Warriors and Team Oscar Mike and paraplegic and amputee athletes. And we went and supported them as they went through their race. And these people, you know, talk about not playing the victim card. You know, they have severely limiting, you know, situations, but they're out there just killing it, conquering it. They're not playing the victim. They're being the heroes. And it put everything in perspective. And after we were done with that, I'm sitting with a group of multimillionaires who were feeling sorry about themselves, or, you know, sort of like critiquing and now they're like, oh my gosh, like, what do I have to, like, be a victim about? These guys just totally showed us up what it means to take control of the situation. So it's really about changing that perspective, getting out of your own victimhood. You're right about that.
So I want to rewind to kind of when you started to get yourself out of the victimhood. You said from 30 to 40 was kind of like where you started going off and doing a lot of that stuff. When did you start to do the introspection to say, like, this is where I think I got this from, or like, this is why I need to go do these things, right? Because you mentioned it's only looking back on it now that you can kind of see what was going on as a child. And it was, for me, it was the same way. Like, it took me a while until I was probably in my early 30s before I really started to look back at what my life experience was growing up that has led me to where I'm at now, to kind of change my direction going forward. And it was right around that same time frame that you were looking at it. So I'm kind of interested to hear how that started sparking in your brain.
Yeah, I don't know when it was specifically the day, but in my early 30s, I started to have this nagging fear or feeling that if I didn't figure out what I was about and what I really wanted, I was going to waste the rest of my life. I was just going to keep running on the wheel that we all run on, trying to get the thing, to try to get more things, try to juggle the family, try to juggle the wife, right? And you get to a certain point where you realize that stuff's like sand in your mouth once you get it. And I need to figure out who I really was. And to me, there was no better way to figure out who you really are than to really scare yourself or push yourself to a limit way beyond what any pretending or shortcut can BS out of, right? I was really good at cutting corners, pretending, playing the role, faking stuff. And I needed to put myself in a situation where if I tried that, I'd get in serious trouble. That's the only way I could get myself out of that, right? got to really put yourself on the knife's edge to where you cannot afford to fake it or to cut corners or to cheat it. So I just sort of forced myself into those situations. And then, progressively, just once I got one of those things done, went to the next harder level, the next scarier level, the next dangerous level, until I really ran out of things to do. In 2019, I did an event called the Death Race, and that was kind of the pinnacle of all the dangerous things that I can do, that I was allowed to do legally, I guess, right? Because there's some things you just can't do. And so after that, I was like, okay, I think I know who I am, what I am about, and I've learned the art of grit and doing hard things on purpose and embracing the suck. Now I got to go use it. I got to do something with it. A friend of mine, after every event he would finish, and he's a world-class athlete, he would say, so what, now what? You did something. You finished this race. You finished this challenge. You conquered this thing. Now what? Because if you don't get the now what, you wasted the whole so what.
Yeah.
You got to take that away. And he really challenged me and other people around me to think about, what are you going to do with this? And it took me a couple of years to figure out what I was going to do with it. And I landed finally on, I'm going to help other people understand the value of grit, how to overcome being too comfortable, and how to inspire people around them to get more resilience in their lives. And that was my now what. And that's what I'm super blessed to be able to be doing today.
Now, if you were to rewind, let's say you did this and you figured this kind of out in your 20 to 30 year range. Your oldest is 25 right now, right? So how old are you now?
45.
45. All right. So let's say you figured that out 25 years ago, right? When you were 20 and you started to kind of figure it out, 22 years old before you had kids. What kind of, or right around the time you're having kids, what kind of things do you think that would have changed in how you were raising your kids and what you were seeing? And what kind of things maybe do you tell folks like myself now who have young kids who, I want to instill in them to have grit and all of that? Like how would you have adjusted what you did? And then what are you telling other dads, especially right now?
Well, first thing right away is I would have run into the chaos and not away from it. I think I spent my first 10 years as a dad running away from the chaos, running away from the discomfort, running away from the frustrating things that I didn't know how to deal with. I define grit as the ability to do hard things on purpose, and the only way you grow it is by doing things that exceed your current capability. And as a 20-year-old dad, everything about my kids exceeded my current capability. Right? So I just ran away. I just tried to avoid it, or I tried to, in a sense, protect myself from the danger of the uncertainty, the chaos. And thank goodness I had an amazing wife who was able to carry that, but it was really hard on her. I was physically there, but and I was happy to run all the errands, to do all the logistical stuff as a dad, because that came easy to me. So I did the things that came easy to me. I avoided the things that were hard for me. That's what I had to learn, is how to run towards the things that are hard for you. Number one, somebody's got to do them, right? Everybody can't run away. Number two is actually makes you much better, right? It makes you much better at doing them the next time they happen. And it makes you better at just understanding, processing, and even thriving in uncomfortable positions, which is what we really need to do as dads. So that's what I would have done differently. That's what I would have told myself. And I'm only sad that it took me till later in life to really get that. But it changed my whole perspective on relationships with my kids. Having difficult conversations is a hard thing. Being vulnerable with your kids is a hard thing. Struggling with your kids is a hard thing. Listening to your kids is a hard thing. Watching your kids fail and make mistakes is a hard thing. These are all hard things that most people will avoid if they don't intentionally choose to run towards the chaos and not away.
Yeah, that's extremely true and difficult to hear, and actually, well, obviously much more difficult to actually put into practice. What do you say right now? Like if I want to go and teach my child how to run into those hard things and do those hard things, and I'm saying this with a real life type of scenario, right? Like my oldest especially is very perfection oriented, very similar to his dad and mom. My wife and I are both very much the same perfectionists. We want things done the right way. It's almost better for us to not do anything at all if we don't think we could do it perfectly, type of thing. Like it just, why would I even do it if I can't do it perfectly? And that creates a lot of difficulty. So how do we embrace said difficulty? And this, I mean, it's a difficulty for me to even try to work with him on that. So how are you looking to folks to say, hey, this is how you embrace that difficulty? Obviously, going out and finding out that you have grit is one thing, right? And you're providing those experiences. But for like right now in a real life example, what would that look like?
Sure. A couple things. One is we all have grit inside of us. This is my viewpoint. We just don't use it as much as we should. It's a muscle. It's sitting there. If you never do push-ups, you're not going to see biceps in the mirror. If you don't go test your grit and force it to come out by doing difficult things on purpose or challenging things that exceed your capability, it won't grow and you won't see it in the mirror and you won't see it come out. So finding out that you have grit is not really a thing. Going and testing your grit and using your grit is what makes it grow. We all have a certain amount of it. But the thing that I tell people, and now I've got a community of people that are doing grit on a weekly basis and coming to events, and this has become a big topic of discussion in our community, is how do we help cultivate grit in our kids, right? There's a fear of our kids. We have the best intentions for our kids. We want to give them everything they want. We want to make sure they can succeed. We want to take away all their struggles. We want to make sure that they never scrape their knees, right? We have good intentions, but they're harmful effects. So the conversations we've been having is, one, you have to go embrace hard things, struggle yourself, because you have to model struggle for your kids to know that it's okay. And not just do it yourself, but communicate to your kids that it's hard for you, that you're struggling. You have to celebrate failure when you do fail and tell your kids that's okay, right? If you're not failing at something, it's probably because you're just not testing yourself hard enough. And so we say it starts with modeling first, showing it to your kids, and then third step is struggling with your kids together. So finding ways that you and your kids can go struggle through something together, overcome a challenge together, fail together even. But it starts, your kids aren't going to want to do that with you if they haven't seen you do it first. And they don't know it's okay. And it's actually a good thing to struggle and fail, because it means you're shooting for something that exceeds your current capabilities. So we're talking about doing that. It can be done at the dinner table through conversation. It can be done every week with some sort of an outing or experience. And it can even be done in a big way every year by doing some epic adventure or some event where you're really struggling beyond your capabilities. And failure is a 50-50 thing that you might enjoy doing together with your kids. And it's okay for them to see that and even go through that.
Yeah, that's. I really want to bring my son out to like a Spartan race or something along those lines. I know that, I know you know Jared, but I love watching his kids, Jared, run. He and his wife and his kid just going out and doing all these hard things together, and I think that's it's so much fun to watch, and so much fun to just enjoy seeing. Like all of my hard. Well, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of my difficult things that I've gone through in life are not places you bring kids, right? I mean, war zones and things like that are not exactly your proving ground for my 8-year-old son. So now it's like, well, I need to show him that Daddy could still do those things. Right now, jumping on a trampoline seems difficult from time to time for me. So we'll see if I do need to get back out there and show him those things. But
and we're working on, with the Grit Club, we're working on a couple of Grit family events where we want to do, parent-kid grit survival challenges that really test and a high percentage of failure, so that we create a safe space for people to go through those grit struggles together, flex those muscles. So we're looking forward to that and doing some of that in 2024. So I think that's going to be fun.
That would be so much fun. Yeah. Let me know when that happens. I'd love to see where the kids and I are and see if that's something that we pull off together. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I'll fight up against Jared since our kids are roughly the same age. So
I think Jared and his kids are good. Yeah, Jared and his kids are in that discussion group. So yeah, I'm
sure they would be all over that. So talk to me. We'll go back to the business side of the house. So you spent 15 years in tech. What? Let me rewind. Let me go back again. Sorry. You got married at a young age, right? 20? Is that about right?
Yeah, 19.
Yeah. So 19 years old. So what led you to getting married at 19 years old? Because that sounds shocking to, I'm sure, some folks, especially nowadays, because you and I are pretty close in age, and I've only been married for 13 years. So, walk me through that.
My wife and I were just talking about this the other night. I knew that I had found the best person for me. And I knew that pretty early. And it was just about how long could I wait to marry this person before, other things pulled our direction and focus away. So, to me, that was, you just got to a point where we were going on separate paths. And if we weren't going to get married, then, the outcome was very much in doubt. So the choice was either marry her now when I was 19 or risk losing the relationship. And I jumped in. I joke with my wife because my plan, which didn't work out, was I'll ask her to marry me now, and that'll buy me a few more years where we'll be engaged. I thought that was a good plan. So I executed the first part, which is asking her to marry me. That went great. The next day we talked. She had a date and a deposit on the church, and it was 9 months away. And I said, I thought we could be engaged for a few years. And my wife, she's great. She's amazing. She came back and she said, I thought you wanted to marry me. Do you want to marry me or not? I said, yes. She said, well, then we have a date. So that was it. That was it. There was no more discussion. The plan was changed, and we got married. What we did.
She was showing you what grit looks like. This is what grit looks like.
I totally played into her plan, which was let's do it. And no regrets. Best thing I ever did. We didn't plan on getting pregnant right away. So 2 months later, okay, now we're pregnant. But we did want to have kids. So now we're like, we just have to shift the whole thing to having no kids 20 years later. Which is where we hit about 6 months ago.
That's phenomenal. All right. So what were you doing at that point? Were you in college? Were you?
Yeah, I was in college and I was valeting cars. Right. So I was parking cars, going to college, which is the absolute best time to start a family.
Yes, spot on. It's exactly when I would do it. Yeah. What did you study in college?
I studied music business, like entertainment business. It was a really obscure program in Nashville, Tennessee.
That sounds like the place that music business degree would be found. Yes.
It was great. I spent my first, 5-6 years working in the music business, which was a lot of fun, a lot of late nights, and not great for family life. And then I said, all right. And then I went to the concert business from there. So another career that was a lot of late nights and travel. And I worked for the biggest concert promoter in the world and ran a VIP program. And then I started a personal concierge service, taking care of high net worth clients, taking care of their concert tickets, their travel, their dinner reservations, their private flights, their personal gifting. And I was good at serving people. I was good at hospitality. And then I started working with high net worth membership organizations. I worked with Tiger 21. I worked with Family Office Association. I worked with YPO and other groups. And I eventually got into technology because those types of groups didn't have technology platforms to help them scale. And I started working on those projects and eventually launched a tech company. And that took me up to about 6 months ago.
All right. So you helped me walk right down that path. I think you saw where I was going. I'm trying to figure out the path of how you got into tech, because there's a big gap between the 15 years in tech and outside of it. So, boy, there's a whole lot there that you knocked out. What was it inside tech that you were doing? What kind of tech company was it?
The tech was pretty much a solution to fill a gap that wasn't there. So, there were opportunities for organizations I was working with. They wanted to build platforms where people could connect, people could share things, people could view resources, but they didn't want to use public or third-party platforms. They didn't want to use groups like Facebook or like circles or things like that. They wanted to have their own proprietary community software to be able to take advantage of special deals, special relationships, special programs. That's sort of more or less what I backed into, is that opportunity to build that. I learned how to be a really good product designer, product manager, team leader. I was never a coder, but I did understand what our development and code guys were doing and how they were building. So I was really more like a product designer, but I owned the company that owned the technology. And that was a lot of fun, but it was never my passion. It was something I was good at. It paid well. And 6 months ago, everything kind of hit a stopping point, and I had to decide pretty much overnight what I want to do with the rest of my life. And if, I'm sure you've been there. A lot of guys in your position have been there when you get out of service and you have to decide, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? It's an amazing thing to have that privilege, but it's a scary thing at the same time, because you really got to make a big decision about the rest of your life and what you want to do with it. And then, you got to own that and live with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say that you were clearly very nice to me before we started recording, when I said, "Hey, if you need any help with anything with the community side of the house, let me know." You seem to have that on lock, so you didn't sit there and say, "Oh, no, I've got all that taken care of." You've got a decent amount of experience of putting communities together and running different programs and organizations. I had no idea that's what you did in tech and did all that. So I will go ahead and back off and say, just let me know if you need just an ear to bend. But no, that's phenomenal. I had no idea that was kind of the route that you took with it. But I'd say that that puts you in a perfect position to just kind of know exactly what a community is looking for, a community especially that you're building now, that is built around your passion. But before I go into what you're doing right now, I want to ask, as you were building your tech stuff and kind of growing through all of these different realms that you did, what kind of exposure did your kids have in that, and what were kind of some of the stressors that came about, that especially when you were working for other people, the stressors that were coming about with your family life?
Yeah, I went through some pretty destructive industries, right? I started in the entertainment business, which is not very family friendly. I went into the concert business, which is, again, not very family friendly. Not that it can't be, it's just the lifestyle and the late nights and things like that. And then I went into personal concierge, and then working with ultra high net worth groups like Tiger and FOA and things like that. That lifestyle is fancy dinners, the best wines, parties on yachts and in penthouses. It's a lifestyle that will chew you up, make you feel like you have to throw everything in the pursuit of the next nice luxury. And I really didn't like who I was in that space. I really, when I was in a quiet place and calm place, I felt better sitting alone on a mountain or in the wilderness with my wife than I did at any, fancy event or dinner. And I really sort of struggled with the person I was in my career was very different than the person that I wanted to be. And I think my kids saw that. It drained me. It was hard for my kids to know who Dad was, because in one sense, Dad was the guy who was on a yacht with a bunch of billionaires. In the other sense, he was a guy that was hiking up mountains, and trying to tap into the simple, nature and what it can speak to us. So I was always straddling those two worlds, and it conflicted with me. And so it took me a while to figure out I need to separate from that other world. It can be a very toxic world if it's not held in check.
Yeah, for sure.
I literally had a situation where I helped the client figure out what kind of helicopter to buy for their yacht. That's the kind of level that I would be dealing with on a semi-regular basis. And I got to tell you, there just wasn't any fulfillment in it for me.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, I would imagine that there's people that are listening that are like, no, that would be amazing. I think that would, but I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things, especially if you're the type of person who's looking for impact and growth and all of this stuff, like what kind of impact are you really making, and now you're able to kind of expand people's brain power. And I'm partially asking that question. I didn't intend for it to lead up to it, but you mentioned before that you saw a big change in the relationship with your kids after going through that stuff that you did from that 30 to 40 year range, and now sitting here doing what you're doing. What kind of relationship change did that make, and was it immediately associated to them with what they saw previously from you?
Yeah, I think I saw a few things. One is when I felt more authentic to who I was, it helped me to connect with my kids more authentically. And two, when I talked to my kids about things that I was really passionate about, they lit up in how they responded back to me, and in a way that didn't happen before. And I was really surprised and shocked at how much my kids sort of lit up in response to me when I finally shared things that I was passionate about that I wanted to do. They became my greatest cheerleaders. They became my greatest advocates in a way that really overwhelmed me. Because as a dad, sometimes you think your kids don't even pay attention to what you do. You're like, you're the old guy, right? So they don't even know. They're consumed by their friends. They're consumed by their worlds. They're consumed by the drama that's going on in school. But they really do pay a lot of attention to us and what's going on. Usually we just don't open up that box of really pouring out into our kids. And then we're surprised when we do, they actually bring it back to us. At least that was my experience. So it took me longer than I wanted to, but I wish I would have, explored that much earlier. But I had my own issues where I was pretending to be this guy over here. And if you're pretending to be something in your career and in your life and things like that, it's really hard to be authentic with your kids. And they probably won't even think you're being authentic because they probably know that's not really you anyway. At least my kids did. It took me a while until I got to that level, and then my kids mirrored it back to me, and it was amazing. It was overwhelming how great it felt.
It's awesome. It made me write down, like, where are you pretending? Like, trying to analyze in my life, and hopefully anybody listening can kind of analyze in their life. Where are they pretending to be somebody they're not? There's so many times in the military you kind of and I was actually talking to my wife about this recently. We were sitting down doing some planning, and I was like, in the military, you had to have, it was almost always a facade, right? Standing at attention is a facade. That's not what you want to be doing. I am pretending to be this person standing here at attention because this is what I need to be for the moment that I am. And it's the same, like, throughout your entire career, there's always this level of pretending. Obviously, leadership is not necessarily, you're not pretending to be a leader. You are a leader, but some people have to pretend to be a leader because they're really not. They're making it up as they go, and they're trying to figure it all out. And there's so many places in life where we catch ourselves pretending. And come here, bud. You can sit with me again.
I was trying to get the iPad.
No, here, it's right here. Take the iPad, buddy. He's just using me for the iPad. Usually when he gets done with his nap, he comes over here, he cuddles on my chest, we keep recording. But no, now he wants to play Khan Academy, huh? You little rascal. Anyways, those are, you could tell that he wears his pajamas all day long. Look at the hole in that knee. Like, that is, he's building up some grit, I tell you what. But I think that figuring out where we're pretending is an extremely important part of life, right? I think that I actually just sent a message to Camille. Camille in Go Buttons? So I sent him a message yesterday talking about how I needed to get on a call with him just because I love his passion and the way he works with people. And I was like, dude, we just need to get on a call. I need to figure out what's going on with me and try to work through some of that stuff. And I'm wondering if I don't know where I want to take that question. Let me ask a different direction. Your kids now, right? You and I were. It wasn't until we were like 30ish, in our 30s, until we started to really be introspective on what our life previously was and where we were kind of missing the boat on certain things. And I'm going to be hopefully redoing that again soon. That's my intent, because I know that I'm still missing the boat on some of these things. How have you yet to have some conversations now with your kids the age they are, between 19 and 25, where like you can really make a huge impact on their future growth by helping them work through that now? What kind of conversations are you having with your kids to go through that?
Yeah, so my wife and I talk about this magical age that our kids got, where they were the same age that we were when we had them. So our 25, our 23, and our 22 have all reached this age where all of a sudden they were the same age that we were when we had them. And it's like this crazy dynamic where all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm the same age you guys were when you had me. And it changes this perspective, this paradigm shift, where they have this enormous amount of understanding and compassion for us as parents about how hard it would be for them right now to have a child.
No kidding.
And it opened up these great conversations with our kids where we felt like we could be vulnerable with them and they would receive it about, yeah, it was really, really hard. It was so hard. You can imagine now what it'd be like having a newborn, and they can't, like, they're like, no way, I couldn't do it. Not even close. I can't believe you guys did this. Like, yeah, we went through it. It was hard. And now you could understand how difficult it was for us. So it gave them an understanding, and it let us start to open up about, you know what, we made 1,000 mistakes, probably every day, but nobody else could have been your parents. Nobody else was going to take that job. We did absolutely the best we could, even though we made a bunch of mistakes. It was hard. We failed, but we were there. We tried. We jumped in, and it really gave our kids a healthy respect for that. So that opened up a new level. I don't think it has to. I don't think if you've got a kid who's 12 now that you got to wait another 10 years before you get to that point. But it certainly helps. But when you're in the fight and you're just trying to make all those decisions, and half the time they might be wrong, half the time they might be right, the thing that I would tell my younger self is, don't get caught up in the wrong or the right. Just be there, make the decision, do what you think is best for your kid. Your kid's probably not going to like it. They're probably going to give you negative feedback. By the way, it has no correlation to whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing.
Yeah.
The feedback you're getting, because half the time, you're doing the right thing and the feedback's negative. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. So just get in, do the work, be there. Eventually, they will have perspective and it will make sense and they will come back. It might be 5 years from now, it might be 10 years from now. Wait for the result. Don't be disparaged because you're not seeing the feedback right now.
Yeah, I love that. I said, wait for the result. Don't wait for the conversation. Have the conversation now. Go through it. And I try to constantly. I've been telling my oldest. I said, look, dude. When he was 4, dude, I've never been a dad to a 4-year-old. I don't know how to do this. I am learning how to do it, just like you're learning how to be a 4-year-old. Like you and I get to learn this together and figure it out. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna screw this up. I don't know. There's one time I go back to this story with him, just because it was while he was sitting on my lap. He kept playing with this toy as I was trying to talk to him. I grabbed the toy and I launched it across the room, and he was probably 3 years old. And I just. I looked at myself and said, really? You're going to have a temper tantrum with your child sitting on your lap? Like, what in the world is wrong with you? So I sat there and I looked at him. I said, buddy, I am so sorry that I just threw your toy. Like, that was completely the wrong thing to do. I was that was a bad decision. And I try to call those out just to continually show them. The other day we were driving in the car. My oldest again says, Dad, you know how you told me that when you were raising a 4-year-old, you had never done that before? You're not right when you think you're about to become an expert at raising a 4-year-old, I turned 5, and now you had to learn how to be a dad to a 5-year-old. And I said, yeah, buddy. And he says, well, now that Rourke is almost finished being 4, you're going to be an expert of raising a 4-year-old. And I said, no, because I never had to raise a 4-year-old while I had an 8-year-old influencing my 4-year-old. So I said, I'm still learning on how to do all of this. I said, I'm never going to stop. I don't know how to do any of this. I think that's that open communication that you're talking about is like, start it now, immediately. Like the second you have, like you said, if your child's 12, don't wait, 10 more years to have the conversation. Like, hey, I'm going to screw things up right now I'm going to screw things up on this podcast as we're talking about things, and just being open and frank and like pushing through it. Like, what else can you do?
The measure of success is when you're in the fight with a parent is not what makes your kids happy. It's not what makes you feel like their friend. I mean, we have a job to do. We have a mission, right? You got to put the mission first, or the mission's going to fail. And the mission is the growth, the health, and the safety of the kids. So many times their happiness, their feelings about you, come in a conflict of that mission. They're the opposite of that mission. So you got to choose which mission you're going to protect. Are you going to protect the growth, the health, and the safety of your kids? Are you going to cave in to what makes them happy, what makes them your friend, and jeopardize that mission? And to me, that was the hardest thing as a dad. And I actually I used those words with my kids. And I learned this as I was going through my grit journey. So I used this when I was sort of a more developed father, is when I was doing survival events and multi-day endurance events, I was taught the value of understanding the mission and placing the mission first. And if you make some choices, they will take you in the opposite direction from accomplishing that mission. You can't afford that many choices there. And I used that terminology with my kids when we were at an impasse, and when they didn't like me, when they didn't understand my decisions, or when they fought my decisions. And I just said, this is the mission as a father, which you have no other father in the world. And my mission is your growth, your health, and your safety. And that's my job. Even when you don't like it, even when you don't agree, I'm not going to change the mission. And, now they come back and they say, I didn't like that, but I knew that you loved me. And I think that's the thing I wanted my kids to know, is when they didn't like me, they knew that they were loved. And I think that's the greatest thing we can do as a parent.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's the desire, even for those of us who are thinking differently, the desire to be the kid's friend can really ruin the child completely, right? I mean, you are not their friend. Like, your friend's desire in their life is not for your growth, health, and safety. Like, no, they want to have fun with you, and they want to be there, and they want to, maybe sometimes do risky things, or maybe do things that they shouldn't, or whatever. That's a friend. Like, that's not a parent. That's not a way to raise solid kids in life that are going to be productive members of society. It's, you can go have friends for that. That's fine. You can talk to your friends that way, not your mom and dad. Like, that's not how we do this. There were times my son told me, he says, well, you don't ever yell at me. I said, I've yelled at you before. And he's like, yell, And I was like, there was one time, and I will never forget it, where you were running as fast as you could. You thought that we were just having a ball, and you went right in between these two cars, not realizing that there was a parking lot. And I screamed so quickly and yelled at you, and you slammed on your brakes, and literally a car went right in front of your nose. I didn't know the car was coming. I didn't know he was about to get laid out by this car. But it was one of those, you did not like being yelled at. I yelled at you, and you turned around and you were about in tears. You were mad at me. But that growth, health, and safety is the first thing that pops into my brain. Like, I need to protect this child to do these things. Where a friend would have just been laughing and joking and having fun until the kid gets, as dark as that is, gets ran over by a car, right? Like, that's not a great thing. But I think the biggest thing, though, to not to go off on a tangent like I just did, but I think the biggest thing that you're hitting over and over again here is the communication with the kids, and the communication with across the board. How much intentionality did you used to, and now currently, put into the communication between you and your spouse, and between the two of you and your kids?
I don't know that going through it, I had the emotional intelligence or even the wherewithal to really structure or be intentional about it. I was going through chaos just like everybody else. I was trying to stay alive. I was trying to chase the things that I thought I wanted to chase. I was trying to keep my kids from, going off the cliff of whatever the next cliff was. But,
or jumping in front of a car, yes.
Yeah. I mean, some people understand what it's like to be in a real life or death firefight. I was in a parenting firefight, and in the chaos, you're doing everything you can. You're making the small steps to like just try to function and be a little bit better, and then get awareness of other people around you. And you're taking the steps to do that. Now that the firefight has cooled off a little bit, and my kids are a little bit older, I have much more constructive conversations with them. But the thing that I probably did spend the most amount of time trying to engineer, trying to make happen was, family dinners, family meals, family experiences. Because when you set those things up, you give the space to have those kind of conversations. You give the space to connect. And from a young age, my wife and I, we taught our kids the value of being open and available to connect as a family. Times where we were doing something together for the purpose of just doing it together. And now to this day, our kids still ask and come every time we call a family dinner. We do it about every 2 weeks, and they look for that. They set aside that. It's important to them. They want to be there. And so we've instilled that from an early age that that's important for our family. And now they respect it and they want it as they're older. So when your kids are 25, 24, 22, and they want to come spend half a day every 2 weeks doing a family meal without all the parents, right, on a weekend, that's prime time for them on a week. And they're happy and they're excited to carve out that time and give it back because they've gotten so much value out of that growing up. And so that's one of the things I think we did. And that probably just built an opportunity for those conversations to happen.
That's awesome. So the intentionality was more based around just opening that environment up for the communication, not necessarily, like structuring anything other than just ensuring that comfortable environment was there.
I look at a lot of friends now raising kids, and maybe it's a different age because, it's 10, 15 years past when mine were the young, but it seems like it's too easy to just overschedule kids in everything. I mean, I have a lot of friends who all they do on their weekend is run kids to different things. That's the entire week. Running kids to this, to this, to this, to this. And the parents are divided because you got 2, 3 kids. So the parents are always running kids. So there's no joint family time because they didn't build it, they didn't protect it, right? Everybody's got a different mission every hour of the weekend, and everybody's running. And, you can keep things running, but the value of the core family coming together really difficult in those situations. There's a lot of other things to unpack there too. It's easier as a parent to just be consumed by activities because then you don't have to deal with any of the real stuff, right? It's easier to have a marriage if you and your wife are just running errands all the time because you're not having to deal with the intimacy of having a relationship. I think there's a lot of things that people do to overschedule themselves to avoid the things that are hard in their lives. And it can be a smokescreen or a crutch. And that's why later in life, when things start to calm down, you realize you don't have a relationship there and it becomes much harder to maintain.
Yeah. When you, your kids, when they were watching you go through all of this stuff, like, inside the tech company and running businesses, like how much were they at all involved in, so I'm pivoting a little bit, involved in the tech business and what you were doing, and what did they see with that?
No, I just think they saw the struggle, the grind of what a typical parent goes through when they're trying to build a career, build a success. In most cases, they see us running after things that are fleeting and consuming and things like that. And I don't really know that they understand what's going on because, I probably wasn't sharing it well enough. But I think really they didn't care. What they cared about was the time and attention that I invested into them, because it's just a lot for a developing teenager or child to understand the perspectives of us. But I think what they fully understand and get is the toll it has on us. What do we have left over for them? If you've just given your kids what's left over after you spent all day grinding and, trying to fulfill or chase whatever you're doing, then all the kid knows is that thing that you've given most of yourself to is just not them. right? And it's nearly impossible to not do that. But that's the thing. That's one of the things that I wish I could have replayed over, is aligning what I was passionate about earlier in life, so that my kids could have been a part of it.
So what would that have looked like, and how would you have realigned those? Obviously, right now, sitting where you're at, that if you would have created Grit Games, 15, 20 years ago, that'd be great. But what would that have looked like when you did have, younger kids and you were trying to align those passions?
I don't know. In an alternate universe, I have no idea how it would have worked out. But, I could have, in hindsight, I could have sat down, put more work into a vision for what I wanted for myself, for my family, for my kids, and then worked the problem backwards of how do I get there, right? All I was focused on is just getting the next goal, getting the next hurdle, making the next $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 raise in, job title, job promotion, position. And, then you're just chasing some sort of elusive thing that you never get to the end of. And then you realize that it didn't really support what you wanted for your family anyway, because all your family was getting was what was left. And it took me a long time to realize, start with the end in mind, start with the vision for what you want your future to look like. What are you going to be doing? Where are you going to be? Who's going to be around you? How are you going to feel? What's your family going to be like? And then work it backwards. Say, all right, how long is it going to take me to get there? What steps do I need to take? Because you might drop everything you're doing and completely change everything, but that's okay if it gets you to where you want to get. But chasing the next thing is like, you don't even know where you're going to get. You don't even have an idea. You don't have a compass. You don't have a bearing. You're just following point to point to point, going in any direction it takes you. To me, in hindsight, that's a dangerous thing to be, because the family gets whatever's left over.
Yeah, that's. Do you know anything about EOS?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I have some friends who implement it for their companies.
So the EOS side of the house, this is going to be like the third or fourth podcast in a row I'm bringing this up because it's fresh on my brain, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Is we build out inside of like EOS, you're going to have your 10-year vision, your 3-year picture, and all these different things. And that helps make sure that you're driving towards the things that you want in your business. You have your mission, you have your vision, you have your core values, you have all of these different things that we build around. And then when we get home, we just give our kids whatever we have left over. We give our wife whatever we have left over. And it's like, well, why haven't I created that vision with my wife and kids? Why haven't I created that mission, that 10-year picture? Like, what does this 3-year picture for us look like? And so when you mentioned like that, building it backwards, like, what do I want our life to look like, and then build it backwards? I think that makes a massive amount of sense, because if you don't know, if you don't know the destination, then you could drive anywhere, right? I think it was who was it? Is it the rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, where she says, well, which way do I go? He says, well, where are you going? She says, well, I don't know. And he says, well, I guess it doesn't matter then. Like, it doesn't matter what way you go. Like, if you don't know where the heck you're going, it really doesn't matter what you're doing. So have that plan built out and understand where you're going as a family. What is it that you actually are striving for? What are your goals? And it breaks my heart to think that I've gone even this long without setting those for my family, and it's, if you were to give advice for, I'm already kind of on the path. I understand the goals. Like, what would you do to say, okay, well, if I was 22 years old, I've got my kids, how would you kind of recommend people build that out? Start to build out what their mission is in life.
Yeah.
I know that could be a very deep question.
Because I don't know if a 22-year-old human has the emotional intelligence and an understanding enough about themselves or what they want to do that. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to go for a vision that you want, even if you got to revise it in 2 or 3 years. I think the difference is in one situation, you have somebody who says, I don't need a map. I'm just going to run to the next point I can see. And then I'll run to the next point after that and the next point after that. They have no idea where they're going to be in 6 or 7 steps. They don't even know which direction. Versus somebody who says, I have an idea of where I want to end up. I'm going to try to work my way there. Now, that person may revise that 5 or 6 times over their life, but they're in a much better position than the person who's just running to the edge of the field and then just deciding what's next after that.
Yeah.
So, that's the advice I would give myself. The other advice I would give myself is stop chasing after the shiny things. Right? I spent too many years being the stereotypical, alpha male who wants to go out and get the next shiny thing. And you just realize, I said it earlier, it just becomes sand in your mouth once you get it. And there's trillions of dollars in marketing spent every day, every year, however you want to measure it, to go get those shiny things. And that's what being a man is about. That's what being successful is about. But it's not. You get to that point, you realize you have more of a treasure in your kids and in your wife than you can ever achieve out chasing shiny things. But we give a sliver of our time and attention and priority to those things versus what they deserve. And the matter is that companies don't grow and make money if we spend all our time and resources on relationships with our kids and our wife.
Yeah.
So there's no marketing that supports that, right? Apple's got to grow. Microsoft's got to grow. All the mortgage companies, all these companies have to have 10, 15, 20% growth every year, which means you got to be constantly chasing and buying the shiny things. So I'd love to turn our economy around where success equals having a better relationship with your kids and having a deeper marriage with your wife. And that's what we spend our money on. But it's not the reality. We have to be counterculture. We got to fight against the norm. We got to be the minority who invests in that while everyone else is saying you got to chase this, because that's just the way it is. You can't change that machine. But it does make it hard, and I wish I would have figured that out a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that obviously chasing the shiny object is a problem in business and in our family life, right? And I've told my wife, and I was recently telling somebody else when we were talking about goals. She was asking me like, how do you continue to chase these goals? Like you drive. You always going. And she was struggling. Like, should I keep just always going? And I because I wrote these goals down. That's where I want to be. And I think it should be a constant view, right? Like we revamp our 3-year vision. We actually just did today. We were starting to revamp our 3-year vision a little bit more, because every quarter we're going to brief our 3-year vision and what it looks like. Well, every quarter something changed in our company. So it's bound to happen. So, I fly small planes, and I would say, even if you're on autopilot, like 90% of the time you're off course. You just have to keep making these tiny little corrections and keep going to make sure that you get to your destination. So, as long as again, the direction you need to go, then it's easy to make those course corrections and say, okay, well, I am off course a little bit here because I know that I need to go this direction for my family and this direction to do these things. But you can't unless you actually know where you're going. Like you said, I mean, you can't just get to the edge of the field and go, well, I'm almost there. Well, almost where? Where are you going? And it's an exhausting run to try to figure that out. And I've been there before I got married, and then again before I had kids, and then again now that I've got kids. It's like, golly, it just, you got to always keep readjusting. There was something else I was going to say. I don't remember what it was because I rambled for too long. It was really good too. It was a really good question, I should say. Yep, I don't remember what it was. So tell me more about the Epic Grit Club. What is it that you're actually driving people through? What are kind of what's your vision and mission for that? Let's dig in a little bit deeper on that.
Sure. So the mission of the Epic Grit Club is to help business leaders, owners, and operators understand the value of grit, how to cultivate it and grow it on an everyday basis, and then how to use that grit to change their own world so that they can impact more people. So we start with what is grit and why is it valuable? So the understanding is that grit is the ability to do hard things on purpose. And you can grow that skill by doing things that exceed your current capabilities, by struggling and overcoming struggle. And really, a lot of business owners, and I approach business owners because I've been there and I've seen the unique cycles of business owners. A lot of people who've built successful businesses did it by utilizing grit. It's a common trait in entrepreneurs, business builders, wealth creators. But once you achieve a certain level of success, it becomes much easier to embrace comfort and luxury and things like that, which can often erode the grit that you once had. And then you wake up one day and you don't have that grit that you had before. And so it's actually the success that erodes the comfort, or the success that brings the comfort, and then the comfort erodes the grit. And likewise, then you have kids and you can afford every luxury for your kids, and then your kids don't have the grit that you had growing up. So we want to try to solve what I call the grit gap, which is that, grit brings success, success brings comfort, comfort erodes grit, and then you're back to zero. So the idea is that first we have to understand the value of it. Second, we have to know how to grow it. And that's by challenging yourselves every day, every week, a couple times a year to do really hard, really uncomfortable stuff. It starts with mindset, then it goes into action, then it goes into results. And that's what we did. We formed a club. People have accountability with other people. We do weekly grit challenges. These are just hard things on purpose. It could be a physical thing. It could be a relationship thing. It could be a project-oriented goal that you've been avoiding, and you have to identify that and what you can do to overcome it. This week, we're playing a thing called the rejection game, where you've got to get rejected once a day, 7 days in a row. It's just to get rid of the fear of failure. So I asked my Amazon guy if he'd go to lunch with me. I asked the guy at Dave & Buster's if he'd let me be a free game tester for an hour. I asked a famous scientist if he'd let me test one of his experiments on me for 30 days. So those are just things that you're going to get rejected at. You got to get rid of that fear of getting rejected, and that's our grit challenge for the week. So I'm having a blast. I'm leading guys through their own grit journeys. It's not about being an amazing athlete. It's just about challenging yourself to get into uncomfortable things, do the uncomfortable things, and then apply that to be a better business leader, a better father, a better husband. I've been around some of the hardest races and survival events in the world with a lot of people. And we have a saying called, so what, now what? The so what is you just did this event that was awesome. The now what is, what are you going to do with that? Right? If you don't do anything to change the rest of your life with what you just learned, you failed the event. You finished the event, but if you don't change the rest of your life, the takeaway is what matters. If the only thing you do is get better at learning how to carry around a 100-pound sandbag through the wilderness in Mongolia, or how to build an ice cave in Iceland, those are very limiting skills. You're not going to be able to change the world with that skill, and you're not probably going to ever be able to use it much in the rest of your life. If you learn how to take that, extrapolate it, be a better father, a business leader, husband, and a friend, you can change your world.
Walk me through, you've got, tell me some more of the grit. The reason I'm asking is I'd love to put my kid through some of these grit things as well. Because I think that we could set up some grit games for all of our kids that will help build this out. There's that saying, as you were saying, going through, the grit has caused you to be able to be a successful entrepreneur. It reminds me of that, that wonderful thing of, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. It just kind of keeps going. So if, and we've talked about it multiple times in GoBundance, like how do we make sure that our kids get the resilience that they need, that we had to build going through the things we did, that they're never going to hopefully ever have to experience. So on a weekly basis, you're putting a bunch of guys who are very successful through some things that make it difficult for them. What are some more examples of some of these things that make it difficult for them that you're forcing people to go into to stretch their limits?
So we've got a yearly.
Don't share too much because people still need to be able to go and join so that they don't know what to expect. Right?
Yeah. So we do a yearly program. It's 52 weeks. So we're doing 52 grit challenges a year. And we've just gone through our 10th week because we just launched the club a couple months ago. But in our first 10 weeks, we've done, an anonymous gratitude challenge where you had to go personally benefit an individual in some meaningful way where you didn't get any credit or any recognition or any benefit. You can't help someone who can help you back, right? So this is the challenge we went through. We did a progressive plank challenge where the first person to post it had to do a 5-minute challenge, and every other person who posted had to do 30 seconds more. So, it was a last man standing thing, which was just everybody. But the takeaway there is most people thought they couldn't even do a 5-minute plank. But then the guys who didn't think they could do 5 minutes were doing 7 or 8 or 9. The guys who didn't think they could do 6 or 7 were doing 9, 10, and 11. We got up to, we got up pretty high, right? The idea is that people don't realize how strong they are until they have to prove it.
Yeah.
And most people don't put themselves in a situation where they have to prove it because they're afraid of it, right? One of the guys in our group is Charlie Engle. He's the only guy alive who's run across the Sahara Desert. And, people ask him, how did you run across the Sahara Desert? That's impossible. He said, because I refused to quit. I refused to say it wasn't possible. I just demanded that my body did it. Now, not everybody can just go out and do that. There was a lot of training, there was a lot of work, but at the end of the day, the difference maker was he demanded his body to rise to the occasion, and it eventually did. And that's the lesson I take away from that. So we've got challenges where guys are having to be vulnerable with each other. They're having to record a video, answer 7 questions that are really difficult to answer, require a lot of thought about emotions, childhood, struggles, things they want to be accountable for, and they're putting it out there. Guys are sharing some things they never shared before with a group of people that they trust. These are scary, hard things, even for guys that have achieved great levels of success. And the average net worth of the 30 founding members is probably north of 4 million. But these guys, we all have struggles. We're all human beings with fragile issues and challenges we've got to overcome. And everybody starts where they are today, and we got to measure the gain, not the gap. Right? So that's sort of the ecosystem of this. And then a couple times a year we get together, we do a 6-hour or 12-hour or 24-hour epic grit event where we're really challenging everything. There's sleep deprivation, there's food deprivation, there's 60-pound sandbags being passed around, there's water, there's lots of tools that will bring out the demand to be stronger. And we're going to celebrate that. We're going to celebrate failure. We're going to celebrate overcoming failure. We're going to celebrate a newfound strength that'll reset the bar for what you're capable of in the future. That's really what we're doing with the club.
That sounds like an extreme amount of fun, and I look forward to hearing more about what goes on there. So I know you have a hard stop here, so I want to make sure I'm respecting your time. So if there's anything that you wanted to add on, is there any questions you have or any ideas or things that you really wanted to touch on that maybe we haven't yet?
Yeah, if there's one thing you take away from this conversation, it's the motto that I live by, and I think it's the most impactful thing that I could share with people. And it's simply do hard things on purpose as many times a day as possible. To me, that is the key to unlocking so much that you never knew was possible. Do it because it's hard. Do it on purpose, not because you have to, but because you get to, as we talked about earlier. I've been in some of the most extreme, chaotic, difficult situations, scary situations in my life. And if you have the mindset that this is something you get to do, you will most likely get through it. If you have a victim mindset, that you will not likely get through it. I mean, I've seen that difference play out. I've seen guys almost die. I've seen guys die and have to be revived because they succumb to the victim mentality and they were not the heroes in their story. So the do hard things on purpose, you could phrase it as embrace the suck. You can phrase it as be comfortable being uncomfortable, whatever it is. If you just start with that mindset, you take it into your work, you take it into household chores, you take it into your relationships with your kids, you take it into golfing with your friend. I don't care what you take it into. Try it. It will change everything. I'm not saying you'll succeed more. I'm just saying your perspective on everything will change. If you want to be a strong dad, do hard things on purpose. Do it with your kids. Do it with your family. Do it when nobody's looking. Do it everywhere you can.
Yeah, it's raining outside, and half of this conversation, I've told myself, you're going to get outside and you're going to run after this. Like you got to go get out and run. And I was telling you before we got on the call, my dog is going crazy because he wants to go outside. So, well, I guess I got to go do a hard thing on purpose and go for a run in the rain with my dog. Yeah. So, but thank you so much, Clay, for jumping on. It was absolutely awesome to chat with you and learn a bit more about your background that I had no idea about. It was really fun to kind of learn a little bit more about what made Clay. So I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, which I don't think we have had the pleasure of doing yet. But have we? I don't think so. Not in person yet. Are you coming?
We're going to do it soon. Yeah,
are you coming to Vermont by chance?
No, I'm not going to be in Vermont.
You're a bum.
I'll be doing a U.S. tour in January, February, March with my van, doing the free grit tour around the country, delivering grit to as many people as possible. But I'm going to miss that. I'm going to see you, and hopefully I'm going to see you with your kids, and we're going to do some grit stuff together.
Let's do it. Absolutely. But thank you again so much. If you could stick around for just a second, I got something else to take care of after we stop recording. But thank you all, everybody. Please, one last thing. If they wanted to reach out to you, find out more about you, I'm sure it's going to be in the show notes. But tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, we got Facebook, Instagram, Epic Grit Club. You can always email me. I love email. It's old-fashioned, but clay@epicgritclub.com. I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Clay. Everybody, like, subscribe, reach out to Clay. Go do hard things on purpose. We really appreciate you coming here and sharing all of that. And we'll see everybody on the next episode.